Hello, I'm Dr. Jack Mitchell, and welcome to Whyz Hr. All you want to learn about human resources. Let me ask you a question. What do you think the role of HR is in building a corporate culture, a business culture? We're going to be discussing that. Stay tuned. Welcome to our show tonight. And as you know, I always have a celebrity co-host, and we've been really fortunate over the past couple of months. We've had Roz Johnson, who is the director of HR for the city of Stuart, Florida. Last month, we had Natalie Cabrera, who's the director of human resources for the city of Port St. Lucie. And tonight, I really want to introduce you to a very good friend of mine and someone who really is a wonderful HR professional, Colette Gotti. And Colette's going to be my co-host and a professional expert on human resources for the month of August. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. What a nice introduction. I really appreciate that.
That's great. We're going to have you introduce yourself and a little background in just a minute, but just want to kind of give the guidelines of what we do here on Whyz Hr. Number one is, as you know, there's three goals that I have. Number one goal, I want it to be enjoyable because this is our time and it's our free time and it's your time. So we want it to be enjoyable. The second thing I want is that it be engaging, that it's not a lecture. It's not going to be a stuffy kind of presentation. This is going to be a discussion with Colette and myself, and we have a wonderful guest that's going to be joining us tonight. And all of us have many years of experience in human resources. So it's going to be us giving you, our wonderful audience, insights and concepts from experienced HR professionals. And so we want to share with you the years of experience we've had and some of the knowledge and insights, hopefully that we've gathered over the past years. And our third thing is we really want it to be informative. We don't want to waste anyone's time, and we really appreciate your time watching us. So we want to make sure that we're sharing good information with you and for you. So those are the three goals that we have. Do you remember what this bell is all about?
When there's a good idea, you ring the bell to make sure.
Did you hear that? Exactly.
People hear it.
That's wonderful. So we like to emphasize when a good idea happens. Now, hopefully you'll hear it tonight, that we'll be able to ring the bell once in a while. But let's get into the show tonight. And Colette, if you'd be nice to share a little of your background, where you're from, how long you've been in the community, how long you've been at your present job. Let me tell you that Colette is the Director of Human Resources for the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County. So she has a very important position. So why don't you tell the folks a little about yourself and about your position and a little bit about the Solid Waste Authority.
Okay. Well, as Jack mentioned, I'm currently at the Solid Waste Authority. I've been there for about a year and a half now, and I can honestly say it's one of the best experiences of my career. So I'm thrilled to be able to end there. The leadership team is bar none the best ever. Prior to that, I worked in St. Lucie County as the HR director with the tax collector. Before that, I worked for Martin County School District, actually as a benefits specialist. And prior to that, I was in New York, where I worked for Verizon Communication for 30 years.
Wow.
So I've had a full breadth and depth of HR experiences from the ground up. And so it's nice to be able to be where I am now. So I'm thrilled.
That's wonderful. Can you tell us a little about the size of the authority and what your major work is and the mission that the Solid Waste Authority has here in the Palm Beach County?
Sure. So the Solid Waste Authority is waste disposal. It's premier. It's the only state-of-the-art waste disposal system that has renewable energy facilities, and we're world-renowned, and that's demonstrated by the leadership team there.
How many employees would you have?
We have about 420 employees right now.
There's that many. Wow.
Yeah.
So she's a very important person.
Well, I'm part of the team that makes the place run, and I hope that I can contribute in some way.
That's what. Now, for 400 employees, how many staff, HR professionals and HR people do you have in your team?
We have 3 HR professionals with me. I have a staffing and recruiting manager.
Yep.
I have a benefits manager, and then I have an HR generalist that kind of does the catch-all and everything else for us.
And do you have any support people with that, or
The HR generalist or specialist is really my support person.
Okay, great. Now, is that kind of a standard number, do you think, in terms of 3 or 4 of you for 400 people?
I think so. I think the standard is about 100 to 1, generally speaking.
Yeah, I think
So
that
we're on par.
Yeah, I think that once a company gets to about 100 to 125 employees, that's when it's recommended that you get a professional HR person in. Many companies will have a very good, competent person who handles a lot of the HR functions. But once you get to 100 to 125 employees, rule of thumb is that's when a company really should think in terms of bringing in someone that is educated and schooled in HR management. One of the things that many people have degrees, there's an organization called SHRM. Can you tell the folks just a little about SHRM and what that does for, especially for a new person coming in, and why it would be beneficial for maybe a new person to have some exposure to SHRM?
Sure. So SHRM stands for the Society for Human Resource Management, and it's one of the professional organizations where you can get credentialed as an HR professional. And they have 2 designations. One is a professional in human resources, and one is a senior professional. For a senior professional, that requires a little bit more experience. I think there's a number of years that you have to have worked in human resources to be eligible to sit for an exam. There is an exam that you take, and
It's pretty strenuous.
It is.
A lot of people don't pass it for a number of tries, so it's serious.
It is a difficult exam. It covers the full breadth of all HR, from recruiting and staffing to all of the labor laws, Title VII, ADA, FMLA. So everything within human resource structure, from benefits to compensation, employee relations, the whole gamut is covered in there. And you have to know the laws, you have to know the rules and regulations and where to go. And then they actually give you situational examples. If this were to happen, what would you do? So, and as most people know, nothing in human resources is straight black and white, because it all depends.
Yeah, you're dealing with people.
Exactly.
You're dealing with people.
Exactly. So it's a tough exam, but it's definitely worth, going
So
for.
as an employer, it may be wise when you're hiring your first professional HR for your team, once you have that 100 to 125 employees, you may want to look for someone that does have that PHR or SPHR credentials, because it means that they have gone through a series of classes and information and ultimately tests, very difficult tests to get those designations. I used to teach preparing students for, and it was at the FAU down in Boca. I was an associate professor there, and I taught students in my specialty was recruiting, and wonderful, bright young people, and I had a great time doing that. Talking about a young and bright person, we have a guest with us, and we're going to add to this team of Colette and myself. Colette, introduce, if you would, our special young guest.
Thank you. So our guest this evening is David Wood. He is a colleague of mine. David worked for the clerk of the courts at St. Lucie County when I was at the tax collector's office.
Oh, okay.
And David's moved on now to another opportunity. So I'd like to welcome him here tonight. Hi, David.
Good. How are you?
Good. Very good. Thank you. And you?
Very good. Man, thanks for letting me join. I appreciate that.
Tell the folks a little about your background, where you're from, and are you been here on the Treasure Coast for a while, and so forth, and a little of your business and professional experience.
Okay. As far as business-wise, I have about 16 years of government, and prior to that, 14 years in the private sector, through utilities and that. So I have a little bit of mix of both government and non-government. So that's I think that well rounds a person. Dual certification in HR, Microsoft certified. So I dabble a lot in the technical side of things, which helps me from an HRS perspective, in addition to doing the other technical issues with HR and dealing with people issues too. So I enjoy it. I love it. So it's been a great part of my life and a great learning experience and dealing with people.
I think many of us involved in HR actually love it. I mean, it's really more, it's not a job. It's really a way of life for us, and almost a calling, a vocation, if you would. I think it's a very special, for some people who have the right kind of personality and temperament, it could be just the best job ever. And for those that don't have the right temperament, it could be really frustrating. It's a job or a career where you really don't have authority as such, but you have a lot of influence, and you can make a lot of difference in people's lives, especially behind the scenes. I was telling Colette when we met to talk about the show that I feel that there's so many people over my career that I've helped, but they'll never know that I helped them because it was with their boss, recommending raises, recommending various things for them, recommending promotions. So they never really will ever know what I did, but I know in my heart and my mind what I did for so many different people. I can't recall many of the things, but it's just part of being, an effective HR professional. So I think it's just a wonderful, for the right people, for the right gifts that you have. David, let me ask you, what do you think is some of the characteristics or traits someone should look at in considering whether or not they should get involved with human resources as a career? What would you suggest?
I think that you have to have the temperament and the emotional intelligence to be able to do it. I think that's a lot. You do have to deal with some very difficult situations that are not always easy. There's not always a definite right and wrong answer to it. You have to be able to learn. You have to be able to learn and grow, not only from the psychology side of it, but also the technical side. So you have to have somebody who's pretty well-rounded to be able to do that, a communication style, different level of audiences and things like that. So you have to have lots of those types of things, because the message can be very different when you're delivering it at the C-suite level to being able to do it on the front lines. It's a very different message that you learn how you need to be able to present.
Boy, those are great insights. I'm going to ask Colette the same question, then I'll share my input. But let's take a quick commercial break. We'll be back right after the break.
Well, we've primarily used the DISC assessments with Dr. Jack to hire a number of senior managers. Your assistance with this, which to me is really important. The DISC assessment speaks for itself and is proven to be, a very, very accurate tool. And as you've educated us how to interpret it, it is relatively easy to interpret, but I do appreciate the fact that we're doing it in conjunction with you and that you are helping us interpret and dig deeper than we could on our own. So, I mean, the results speak for themselves.
Thanks, Paul. The results speak for itself. So I've been real fortunate with Paul and his organization to have helped him hire some very senior people into his organization, and they've been hugely successful. So thank you, Paul, for those kind words. Colette, what about yourself? What qualities or characteristics or traits? Because I think that, what David said was really so well said. What about yourself? What do you feel are some of the qualities and traits?
Well, I agree with David. I mean, some of the items, especially communications, is critical. I also think that leadership skills, the ability to be able to lead and be professional and not just go with the flow necessarily, or change your mind just because you want someone to like you or because it's a tough decision. being within HR and having to be responsible for communicating and making decisions that affect employees' lives, sometimes it's very difficult. You
Yeah.
know, you could have an employee where there's a situation that you want to say yes or you want to help them, but, you know, realistically you can't, because whatever you do with them either, you know, is a violation of law, policy, procedure, sets a precedent. So you have to be able to manage through that to help that situation to have the best possible outcome. So I think being a leader, being professional, being empathetic, the ability to be able to listen and really hear what they're saying, not just necessarily the words. And to your point, to be able to influence, you know, if you see something wrong, you know, you have to be able to say something. I always tell every person, you know, if you see it, say it, you know, so can't be complacent.
Don't I have wonderful guests today?
Thank you.
This is so good. The picking up on what both of you said, I think Paul used the expression the emotional intelligence. David, rather, not Paul. David, excuse me, mentioned the emotional intelligence, and I think that's so valuable. And also, both of you talking in terms of the temperament that you need, because you want to be liked. Most of us HR people, you know, are expressive and we're caring and so forth, and so you want to do things that help people, and you hate like heck saying no, but there does come a time when you're responsible for saying no, because it could be inappropriate, maybe even illegal. And what Paul said, David, I don't know why I'm calling you Paul, excuse me. What David said, that, you know, that you have to have good technical skills, good legal skills, good, you know, communication skills. That's all correct. You know, my background as a psychologist has really been beneficial in terms of having the ability of listening and coaching and so forth. But also I'm a lawyer, so I do have the technical knowledge that's there. What I'm lacking, and what David brought up, was the technical aspect. Today with the HRIS and the systems that are needed is really a gift that David brings to the table. Do you have that yourself, Colette, or do you have someone on your team that really is gifted, or how do you work that? You know, David has the technical skills, but how about you? Because I don't, and so I have to call upon other friends of mine that have those kind of technical skills. One of them is our producer here, who helps me a lot in my technical needs. She and her husband are both really gifted in terms of social media and those technical skills. How about yourself? Do you have someone on staff, or do you have that gift?
Well, I think I have the process, how to identify a process and do a process flow and root cause analysis. So I have those kinds of technical and analytical skills.
Yes.
I'm strong in. The actual programming, no, not so much. So we have an IT department, of course, and we have somebody in communications that does our social media. Those are two areas of expertise that I think, to David's point, David can do. In fact, on our way here, we were talking about it, and David was sharing what all of the technical stuff he's done in his past. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to call you for that. But no, for us, I have an IT department that's wonderful. So I'll reach out to them for help, as well as communication, Facebook, Twitter, and all the social medias. But I can identify the process flow and get to the root cause and design it. And that's where my expertise ends.
Yeah, I understand. Much more advanced than me. The kind of stepping back, Colette, in terms of the role of the HR professional, how would you articulate to an employer, to an employee, or even to a young HR professional? What do you see, and how would you articulate the role of an HR professional in an organization? That's kind of a heavy philosophical question, but I think it's
depending on your angle.
Yeah.
So the role really of HR is to help the leadership team and the organization meet their goals as bottom line. And how you do that is you do that through people. So as HR, you have to be able to communicate what that goal is of the organization, mission, vision, values.
Mhm.
And so at every new hire that comes in, they need to understand why we're here, who we are, what we do, how we work, what their job is, how their job and their role in the organization fits in to help the organization be successful. So you have to be able to connect those dots in a way that every person that you speak with understands why they're important.
So it's really establishing the culture, isn't it? Another understanding where senior management is and the goals and so forth, and developing a culture that will fulfill those goals and those standards in the mission.
Right, because culture is really how you behave, what's important to the organization. And some organizations say, oh, we're very family oriented. And it's like, okay, so what does that mean? And what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
How quickly do you discipline and fire people? What kind of a family do you have? So it really depends on what you say. And that, in a prior job, that was really important to them, being a family. And they show that by the support and the relationships and working with one another. So,
just as an aside to that, for employers and HR people, I know there've been situations legally, and every once in a while I put on my legal hat, but there have been situations when a person has gone to court because they were terminated, and the company really put forward that we're a family, and they said that, you didn't act as a family. You said that we were a family, and yet you've terminated me. And so the courts have been sympathetic to that. So my advice is, don't use the term we're a family, we're a team. It's a much wiser thing. So that's just, thank you. I'll throw that in for the cost of nothing. But be careful about using those terms, because that can come back to bite you. So just from a legal point of view. David, yourself, how would you articulate what you feel is the role of HR in an organization?
As far as from a cultural standpoint, is that what you? Well, I know HR is a very important part of that, because we bring people in the door. So from a hiring perspective and things like that, we are a very important part of when we interview people and we get ready to staff a job, and knowing, is that person going to be able to fit in with the groups that you're going, we all have the technical skills and things like that. But as far as communicating the culture, HR should have a seat at the table and understand what that culture is, because it drives your expectations for behavior, basically.
Well, that's excellent. Excellent. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back right after. Stay tuned.
Some of the benefits that we've received from the Leadership Institute is, one, getting to know what your work style is, and just finding better ways or the best way to communicate with not only your team, but with people in general. And I found this leadership training to be something I did not imagine. It's been very enjoyable. It's very interactive. And I'm learning things about myself that I didn't know before. It really makes you think and look at things in a different perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Ali. Ali's involved in a institute that I'm providing down in Wellington, and she's part of the management team there. And part of that is having the managers really become, she's not the senior manager, but she's one of the managers. She's a supervisor. In having the supervisors and the mid-managers really understand the culture of the company and really work towards identifying that. And then, as David said, and you have said, the behaviors that flow from what is the culture of that company. But to me, the culture starts with the top, with the owners or the CEOs, and then with the key top executives, and then it cascades down. But I think that it has part of the role of the HR professional is to help the senior management really articulate and live the culture that they articulate. And one of the things that's challenging is to challenge one of the senior managers. And David, have you had that experience when a senior manager has not been behaving in the same way that's in congruence with the culture of the company? Have you ever had to confront a senior manager in terms of some behaviors? And if so, tell us a little about that.
I have. It helps, I believe, in our role to have that culture well defined, because as long as it's defined, then you can say that the behavior is not in line with our organization's goals and its culture. And it does give you a better leg to stand on for telling them that behavior isn't acceptable or tolerated. It's not necessarily always an easy conversation when you're having to do it to a superior level person, but HR's role's not, you don't get into the role that we're in because it's easy.
Yeah, good point. Thank you for that. Colette, the same question. Have you had that situation where you've had to confront a senior manager, perhaps at a level even higher than your own, in the organization about the incongruity of his or her behavior vis-a-vis the culture that the company articulates?
In a way, when I was younger, I grew up years ago, everything was very different. So those behaviors were tolerated, right? Because it was by the senior leadership team. But as I grew in the business and as time changed, if I see something, I generally approach it from a conversation perspective, as opposed to kind of calling out the misalignment.
Mm-hmm.
So I ask questions just to understand, perhaps, there's something that I'm not seeing, or there's a reason, and it's never really been blatant. So I've never really had to call it out per se, fortunately. But when there's been disconnects, I'll call them, I will approach them and say, well, here's what the policy says, here's what we're doing, here's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Can you help me understand, so that I can at least back into it or understand where that fits in to all of this, because maybe they're seeing it from a different perspective. So I approach it from that perspective. Maybe I'm not understanding where this fits in or how this aligns.
Yeah. You mentioned two key concepts, in my opinion. One is perception, and the other was that phrase, help me understand. I think that's one of the most wonderful phrases that we use in counseling, psychology, and in human resources. Help me understand, because it's non-confrontational, as opposed to, you messed up, I saw you doing such, when you're pointing the finger and so forth. That makes the person become defensive and you're coming across antagonistic. But if you can say, help me understand, I'm sure you know what the standard is, being a senior manager, and that but somehow or other people are perceiving you going against those kind of, by doing ABC, you point out the behavior and say, help me understand, because I know that you want to be in alignment with that, with the company culture and so forth. Help me understand your perception of, this is how people are seeing it. And obviously you're doing something, your behavior is communicating something that is different. What do you think you're doing that would cause other people to see you in that kind of negative fashion? So and I say, there's basically three realities. One is the perception of someone else, one is your perception, and then there's reality. And so if you can help that, thank you. If you can help that person realize that they're being perceived, they're doing something that people are perceiving as inappropriate. So let's talk about what possibly could you be doing, and help me understand why you think that would be appropriate. And in that terms, then you you're having a discussion with them that's not confrontational, but as you say, it is a discussion. But as David said, you have to be. You're an HR professional, and sometimes you are called to do some tough things, and dealing with a senior manager and helping him or her be appropriate is one of those things. Listen, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. You've been wonderful. I'm going to give both of you bells to ring. Folks, I want you to go to your calendar and tune in, put in next week, next Tuesday night at 7:30, because I'm going to invite David back. He's been so good. Thank you, David, for joining us. And obviously, my wonderful friend Colette is going to join us next week. So if you would, put in your calendar 7:30 next Tuesday for another show on Whyz Hr. All you want to know about human resources. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, David.